is God's will for my life? Should I take the job? Yes or no? Should I make the investment? Should I start the ministry? Should I go on the mission trip? Should I begin a relationship? End the relationship? What if I make this shot? The answer is yes. Difficult shot. All right! Yes! I made the shot. The answer is yes. Now I know God's will. You might be laughing, but I know people who actually try to figure out the direction in their life by doing crazy things like that. If I make the shot. There was a person who was needing direction, so he thought, well, I'll be more biblical. I'm going to just open my Bible. And wherever it opens, first thing I read, that's God's will. And he read, Judas went out and hung himself. No, that can't be it. I'll try it again. What thou doest, do quickly. Obviously, these are not the best ways to figure out God's will and direction for your life. But we have a little bit of help today in Proverbs chapter 16. Starting in verse 1. The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. We make plans for our lives. We make plans for our future. But the answer of the tongue, the answer comes from God. Then in verse 2, all the ways of a man are clean in his own sight, pure in his own sight, but the Lord weighs the motives. Sometimes when we predetermine what we believe to be God's will, the purity of our motives is something that could be questioned. And so God knows our heart. He knows our motives. And then in verse 3, commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. The word commit in the Hebrew meant to roll on. Right now, there could be a big thing in your life that you're trying to determine. It's a decision about your future. It's something for where you really need God's will. You really need to hear an answer. And there can be anxiety when you feel like you're in a holding pattern and you're just not sure. Commit your works. In other words, roll that burden onto God. Instead of carrying the anxiety, God invites us to give it to Him, to commit the work to Him, and the plans will be established. Still reading from Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. We plan our path, we plan our way, but God directs our steps. In the margin of my Bible, I wrote, God directs our steps and our stops. Later, we're going to see in Proverbs 20, verse 24, it says, the Lord ordains our steps. There are a lot of plans I made for my life, and they seemed right, but God was the one who ordained my steps. He directed my steps. When I went to the seminary, I thought I was going to become a full-time evangelist, traveling the country, telling people about Jesus. That was my plan. But God directed my steps differently. God called me to be a pastor, to shepherd His people, and to train His people so that they could be evangelists and they could share their faith, and perhaps then God could use me to reach even more. I never saw it that way. But I had all these plans, and then God directed my steps differently. I almost ended up in Colorado as a pastor once upon a time. Everything about it made sense. except it wasn't God's will. It was my plan, but God had a different plan. God knew that he was going to call me to Huntsville, Alabama. He directed my steps. And later in the chapter, verse 25, listen to what Solomon says. There is a way which seems right to man. I've had that so many times in my life, haven't you? It seems right. The path seems right. The decision seems right. But its end is the way of death. There are some paths that lead to destruction. For that reason, I'm very glad that God steps in, that God intervenes, and when I have my path all planned out, that he directs my steps off that path. Because sometimes if I followed my own plan, the end would be death. So today, as you wrestle with God's will for your life and what the future looks like, it could be a job or a relationship, an investment, a ministry. I don't know what it is you might be wrestling with, but I know this, that we plan, verse 1, we make plans in our heart. We have some paths that seem right, but in the end, God is going to direct your steps. God is going to keep you from making a major mistake. And so if you would commit, verse 3, if you would commit your plans to the Lord, commit your works to the Lord, give him the burden, let him carry it, and he promises that he'll direct our steps. And you won't find yourself one day in the future thinking, oh, if only I had made a better decision. If you're a child of God, the Spirit of God lives in you. And the Spirit of God will lead you into the path and into the will that God has for your life. You don't have to do something silly like this to determine God's will. Just stay connected to the Lord who loves you, and he promises that he will direct your path. Have a great day, Willowbrook, and we'll see you again tomorrow.